everyone, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name's Claire and this is the Wanderlust Way. Today we are in the ancient town of Epworth, which is on the border of sort of Yorkshire and Lincolnshire in the Isle of Axholme. Now this beautiful part of the country is famous as a place of pilgrimage, has been for centuries, but it's because that the brothers John and Charles Wesley were both born in this town, and if you didn't know, John and Charles were the founders of Methodism. In this video, we are going to walk the Wesley Trail for you. I'm going to start off in the Church of St Andrews, which is the reason that the Wesley family came to this glorious part of the country in the first place. We're going to go various places, and then we're going to finish off at the Old Rectory, which is where the Wesley family lived, and it is also the site of a momentous fire that took place, which forms a tremendous part of this story. And for the supernatural fans out there, right at the very end, I'm going to sneak in a little ghost story for you of one of the most important poltergeist stories in English history. So that's a good one. So enough waffle, let's go. Epworth is forever remembered as the spiritual home of worldwide Methodism. Each year it attracts hundreds of visitors from around the world who wish to trace the history of the Methodist movement. With its quaint charm and historical architecture, Epworth is a town and civil parish in North Lincolnshire, England. It lies on the A161, about halfway between Goole and Gainsborough. We are going to begin our wander at St Andrew's Church, but in reality our story begins much earlier than that. For to understand the time of the Wesleys here in Epworth, we have to take a step back a little further, to a time when Epworth, part of the Isle of Axholme, was in turmoil and change. A time when the people of this land were facing a transformative journey, forever to alter the landscape and the lives of its inhabitants. In centuries past, the Isle of Axholme was characterised by its marshlands and waterlogged terrain, presenting both challenges and opportunities to those who called it home. However, it was the visionary Dutch engineer Cornelius Vermuyden who would change the fate of this region forever. And so, in the mid-17th century, with an order from the king, Vermuyden undertook a monumental feat, the draining of the Isle of Axholme. This process involved constructing an intricate network of drainage channels and embankments, effectively reclaiming vast swathes of land from the encroaching waters. It transformed the physical landscape, altering the agricultural practices and forcing change for the many that called this place home. Although seen as a positive opening of new opportunities by the king, this monumental feat of engineering was not without its consequence. The drainage of the Isle of Axholme had a profound impact on its inhabitants, reshaping their way of life and challenging their traditional livelihoods. Amongst this sat the extremely wealthy and powerful Mowbray family. The Mowbrays had a mansion sited close to St Andrew's Church on land called the Vine. They made Epworth the centre of their activities, despite having extensive estates in other parts of the country. A deed made in 1360 by John de Mowbray gave privileges and freedoms to the people of the Isle over the use of common land. Rights over wildlife, including fish and fowl, would offer the commoners a way to feed themselves and their families. The draining of the land saw the ancient rights of these local people encroached upon. As the land dried up, they lost their supply of wild fowl for food, whilst also losing their time-honoured rights to such things as foraging and grazing. Many livelihoods were lost as a result of these changes, and so it didn't take long for a deep resentment towards the king and his supporters to build up in this area. And so now you have a bit of a backstory. You might understand why the arrival of a new rector to the parish church here in Epworth was met with a little resilience. For it is here we'll start our story, when in 1695 Samuel Wesley arrives in Epworth with his wife Susanna and the first 4 of their 19 children. The early years of his marriage and career had taken Samuel to multiple parishes. After falling out of favour with the people of South Ormsby in Lincolnshire, he was appointed rector of St Andrew's Church in Epworth. Unfortunately, Samuel faced a few challenges integrating in Epworth. The locals were now strongly against anyone who was either a royalist, a Tory or an academic, and unfortunately Samuel was all three. He further alienated the locals by enforcing strict adherence to Church of England doctrine, including demanding public confessions of their sins. Historians tell us that the locals did all they could to drive the Wesleys from Epworth, damaging the crops and livestock. Speculation also grew that it was perhaps an act of arson by locals that caused the fire which burnt down the original rectory in 1709, but we'll get to that later in the story. And so our tale begins at the Church of England parish of St Andrew. There has been a church in Epworth since the Saxon period. The Saxon building occupied the space where the nave and the western end of the chancel now stand. The first record of a rector for St Andrew's Church comes from 1233, but the most famous rector was of course Samuel Wesley. Inside the church there is a chair given by Susanna Wesley after her husband was named rector in 1695. There is also the font where a number of the Wesley children were baptised. So the very first stop on our Wesley Trail today, we are at the Church of St Andrews in Epworth, where Samuel Wesley, the father of the Wesley family, was the rector here for 40 years until his death. He provided a great service to the community. However, Samuel wasn't the most popular man when he came and brought his family here to Epworth. Him and his wife Susanna and some of their children, they did come here when he was invited to be the rector. But unfortunately for Samuel, he was a royalist, and at the time in the Isle of Axholme, which is where we are, Charles I was quite unpopular. He had ordered for the draining of the Isle of Axholme, and when the Dutch came, they drained the isle. At the time, the people here weren't very happy with that. If you'd like another video on that, because there's quite a lot of history involved, let me know, drop me a comment, and I'll try and get that sorted. But it is going to take a lot of research, so you have to be patient with me on that one. But yeah, this is the first stop. So, St Andrew's Church. Very, very close to the front of the church, we have Samuel's grave as well, which I'll go into with you in a moment, because that's also a very important part. Oh, how nice! The church bells are ringing. So in the churchyard of St Andrews there is a plaque as well, which is part of the Wesley Trail, and it says, "Here lieth all that was mortal of Samuel Wesley AM. He was rector of Epworth 39 years and departed this life 25 of April 1735, aged 72. As he lived, so he died in the true Catholic faith of the Holy Trinity in unity, and that Jesus Christ is God incarnate and the only Saviour of mankind." Acts 4-12. "Blessed are the dead which die in the Lord, ye faith the Spirit, that they may rest from their labours, and their works do follow them." Rev 14:15. So we're going to go and find the grave now for you. Samuel Wesley died on the 25th of April 1735, aged 72 years. There was no doubt that he was a clergyman of unwavering dedication, his life marked by a commitment to his faith and a tireless pursuit of knowledge. He is buried in a prominent position in St Andrew's churchyard outside the south door of the chancel. Over the years his grave has eroded, but its epitaph is said to read, "Here lieth all that was mortal of Samuel Wesley. He was the rector of Epworth 39 years and departed this life 25th of April 1735, aged 72. As he lived, he died in the true Catholic faith of the Holy Trinity, in unity, and that Jesus Christ is God incarnate and the only Saviour of mankind." Acts 4-12. "Blessed are the dead which die in the Lord, ye faith the Spirit, that they may rest from their labour, and their works do follow them." Revelation 14-15. We are now in a very important part of the historical trail, and that is the tomb of Samuel Wesley. John Wesley, his son, was banned from preaching inside the church because of his radical views, and so he chose to preach here from a perch on top of his father's table tomb outside the priest's door to the church. Under the law, the tomb was his family's possession, so he was technically on his own property when standing there. On that day in 1742, a huge crowd gathered to hear him preach, and the event has been immortalised in several paintings over the years. So many visitors have tried to recreate the scene over the years that the church has now had to put a railing around it. John Wesley later wrote of preaching from his father's tomb, stating, "I did more good in 3 hours on my father's tomb than in 3 years as my father's curate." Opposite the doors of the St Andrew's Church was a really, really, really important part of Epworth history, and that is to do with the Mowbrays. It's says on this sign, "On the green and tranquil area to the south of the church once stood Epworth Manor House, a seat of the powerful Mowbray family. Landowner Geoffrey de Worth, who had been given land by William the Conqueror, died leaving no heir. The Mowbrays, a powerful Epworth family some 300 years before the Wesleys, became lords of the manor and commanded considerable respect for many years." Leaving St Andrew's Church and heading to the Market Cross. In later years, John Wesley wrote of Epworth, "I still love it beyond most places in the world." And so, as we walk along the peaceful, tree-lined track towards the centre of Epworth, I'll fill you in with a little more about this ancient town. The town's name has since been used for other places and institutions affiliated with the Methodist denomination of Christianity, and there are towns and cities all over the world that have been named Epworth after this small market town in the north of England, including places in Canada, the United States and Zimbabwe. If you've been to any of these Epworths, do let me know in the comments. A plaque on the wall not too far away tells us that in June 1852, the marketplace was the scene of one of the greatest peacetime riots in British history. According to the Isle of Axholme and Hatfield Chase Landscape Partnership, it involved 3 candidates for the North Lincolnshire seat that had all agreed to hold a political address on the same day in the same place, here in the marketplace. Violence soon erupted with stones and bottles used as missiles, and the wooden platform that had been built for the candidates to speak from was ripped apart and used by supporters to hit one another. Several people were trampled by horses, and it took several hours for the violence to subside. The last census in Epworth in 2021 showed there is now a population of 4,363 people, with the majority of residents here being between the ages of 50 to 59 years old. 96.8% of residents here were born in the UK. Christianity remains the dominant religion, with 59.7% holding the majority. Apart from the Wesleys and John de Mowbray, other notable people to be associated with Epworth include Ian Botham, cricketer, who was once resident here, and Alexander Killam, founder of the Methodist New Connection. Benjamin Huntsman, inventor and manufacturer, was also born here, and you can find another of my videos that features Benjamin over on the main channel, as he also played a part in the Sheffield Steel story. And lastly, Sheridan Smith was also born here. A Grade 2 listed building, this Market Cross, which stands in the heart of the town, is where John Wesley preached many times. With origins that date back to the medieval times, it was reset in 1806 and has a circular base of 4 steps. He is said to have preached around 40,000 sermons and travelled some 250,000 miles in his lifetime. After leaving the Market Cross, we'll head directly down the High Street towards the new Methodist Church before returning back to the Market Cross and over to the Red Lion Inn, where John Wesley famously stayed.
This is the fun.
Built as a lasting memorial to John and Charles Wesley, the Wesley Memorial Methodist Church was opened on the 15th of September 1889 on Epworth High Street, replacing a previous Wesleyan church. Inside, I'm told you can see a famous stained glass window and the communion table which once stood in St Andrew's Church, from which Samuel Wesley celebrated communion. Should we have a little walk? It is still a very active church, and if you visit their website it will let you know when the services times are. Outside the church is a modern memorial garden created in 2013 as a gift from Steve Walsh, a regular attendee. One of the main garden features is a striking statue of John Wesley standing on top of a globe. This statue is a reminder of Wesley's quote that, "The world is my parish." Near the statue is a bas-relief of Charles Wesley. The church is extremely easy to find. It stands on the south side of High Street at the western approach to the town, just off the A161. It is easily reached on foot from the Old Rectory and St Andrew's Church. The church is normally open to visitors daylight hours. And so back up the High Street to the Red Lion Coaching Inn. Now, the Red Lion has featured in one of my previous videos, the haunted pubs of Doncaster, but today we are not here for the ghosts. Today we are here because it is famously known to be where John Wesley stopped when he returned to Epworth. The lion has stood in the centre of Epworth Marketplace for, well, according to the sign, since the Middle Ages, and it is believed that John Wesley actually stayed here when he returned to Epworth on his visits. We've been invited to go inside to have a little look. Outside, it says John Wesley stayed here. John Wesley was here in 1742. We are in the famous Wesley suite. This room has been themed to be in with the John Wesley feel. I think they used to have a photo of John Wesley above the fireplace, but they seem to have got rid of that. Yeah, so you can actually stay here. If you've got an interest in the Wesleys and you're coming to do the Wesley Trail, you can actually stay here as well. Interesting is inside the dining room here at the Red Lion, they have one of the original paintings of the Wesley Fire that famously John Wesley was saved for, and he later went on to believe that, you notice here in the painting we've got Samuel praying, we've got the rest of the Wesley family seeking sanctuary from the flames, and here is John Wesley being pulled from the fire. There's a 5 to 6 year old boy, and this moment goes on in history. This is the key moment when John Wesley really believes he's been saved by God for a purposeful thing. John was almost 6 years old when a raging fire destroyed his home, the Old Rectory. He was rescued from a second-storey window. Hetty, the middle daughter, noticed the blaze during the night when the roof started falling down onto her bed. The alarm was raised for everybody to get out. The nursemaid took the children, and with Susanna heavily pregnant, they retreated outside. It wasn't until they'd got everybody outside they realised that John was still in the house. Both Samuel and Susanna tried to rush through the flames to get to him but failed. Local people made a human ladder with one man standing on the shoulders of another until they could reach the window where John Wesley stood. They miraculously pulled the little boy out of the building at the very moment that the roof fell in. Susanna believed this to be a miracle and that God had saved John for a special purpose. She quoted, "A brand plucked from the burning," which is a biblical quotation. John also believed that there must be a reason for his saving. The new rectory, which we'll visit shortly, was quickly built in 1709 to replace the rubble. It was thought to have cost £400, which left Samuel in debt for the rest of his life. But unlike the previous thatch house that easily caught fire, this new rectory was a solid brick structure. As we now leave the Red Lion and head towards the Wesley statue and the rectory, let's run through a brief summary of the early days of John Wesley's life. John the Elder and Charles the Younger were born into the Wesley family as the 15th and 18th children respectively. We know their father Samuel was a dedicated clergyman, but what we haven't discussed yet is his mother Susanna, who was just as influential to their upbringing. A woman of profound faith and intellect, Susanna provided a nurturing environment where education and spiritual growth flourished. Susanna's influence on her sons was profound. John Wesley credited his mother with shaping his spiritual journey, describing her as a woman of deep piety and unwavering faith. Susanna's legacy extends beyond her own family, and her writings on theology and motherhood have inspired generations of Christians. Theirs was a childhood marked by discipline, deep-rooted religious devotion, and intellectual curiosity. From their parents they inherited a legacy of learning and a fervent commitment to their Christian faith. In the rectory of Epworth, amidst the flickering glow of candlelight, young John and Charles were immersed in the rich tapestry of theological discourse and classical literature. Their father, a scholar in his own right, ensured they received a rigorous education, fostering their intellects and moulding their characters. In 1720, at the age of 17, John Wesley entered the Oxford University, where he enrolled at Christ Church College at Oxford. Wesley became part of a group of students known as the Holy Club of Methodists, a name derived from their methodical approach to spiritual discipline. Under the leadership of John's brother Charles, and with the guidance of fellow student George Whitefield, the Holy Club members were committed to a disciplined life of prayer, study, and acts of charity. It was during his time at Oxford that John underwent a profound spiritual awakening. Through prayer, fasting, and diligent study of the Bible, he came to a deeper understanding of God's grace and salvation. After completing his studies at Oxford, John was ordained as a deacon in the Church of England in 1725 and later as a priest in 1728. In 1738, John attends a group meeting in London where he received an experience of assurance of his new birth. He began to preach outdoors and travelled throughout England, Wales, and eventually America, delivering sermons. Striving to do good, the Methodist movement began to start schools for poor children, orphanages and clinics all over the place. So now in front, this is the next stop on the trail, where we are in front of the John Wesley statue that was built in, or was erected in 2003 by a local artist. It's quite an important statue on the trail. Yeah, and we're not far from the Rectory now, so we'll head there next. Whilst we take this short walk from the statue to the Rectory, let's get a lowdown on the growth of Methodism. So we know that Methodism began as a movement within the Church of England, and that John Wesley, an Anglican minister, and his brother Charles, a gifted hymn writer, were the driving forces behind this revivalist movement. Their focus was on personal holiness, social justice, and a methodical approach to religious practice, hence the name, Methodists. Initially, the Wesleys' emphasis on open-air preaching and forming societies within the Anglican Church sparked a spiritual revival across Britain. John Wesley's preaching and Charles's inspiring hymns drew large crowds and stirred a passion for spiritual renewal. Over time, Methodism spread far beyond England. By the late 18th and early 19th centuries, it had crossed the Atlantic to America. It continued to grow rapidly, driven by circuit riders who brought the Methodist message to the American frontier. John and Charles set sail across the Atlantic themselves and landed in Savannah, Georgia, in February 1736, having travelled for around 4 months. The founder of the Georgia colony wished for John to be the priest of a Savannah parish, attracting and converting Native Americans. But he ended up catering mostly to European settlers. For the most part, the excursion proved to be a disaster. Charles got sick and returned to England in the July, and John had difficulty adapting to the area, and he eventually left in December 1737. During this trip, however, the first Anglican hymn book in America was produced, and the first Methodist Society meeting in Frederica was established. Today, Methodism is a global faith with over 80 million adherents worldwide. It has diversified into numerous denominations. Methodism's influence extends beyond church walls. Methodists are known for their commitment to education, healthcare, and social justice. From founding schools and universities to advocating for civil rights and humanitarian aid, Methodists have made a significant impact on society. And the last place on our list is the Epworth Old Rectory. Wesley's lived with their family. We've not been given permission to film inside, but we have been told we can walk around and look through the gardens. So I'll tell you a little bit about the rectory while we do that. This impressive Grade 1 listed house in Queen Anne style is the Epworth Old Rectory, a significant landmark in the story of Methodism. The building we see today was built in 1709 as the rectory for the parish of St Andrews. As we all know, Samuel was the rector of St Andrews, and so as part of that position, him and his family were to live here. The Georgian house we see today was constructed to replace the previous rectory after it had been destroyed by that fire we mentioned earlier. This building is a replacement of the original building that was destroyed in the fire. Samuel had this one built at a cost of £400, and I believe he was still paying that off right to the end of his days, but he wanted a substantial home for his family. It was in this very house that Susanna Wesley would provide her children with their early religious education and discipline, laying the groundwork for their future evangelical missions. Samuel Wesley would also write many of his sermons and literary works here. Today, Epworth Old Rectory stands as a cherished museum and heritage site. It offers visitors a glimpse into the Wesleys' family life and the early days of Methodism. If you do step inside, which I can recommend, it features restored rooms, period furniture, and various artefacts related to the Wesley family. They do also host numerous events throughout the year and guided tours. I have previously attended a tour here by candlelight at Christmas, which finished in the Wesley kitchen, and we were given food to try that the Wesleys would have enjoyed at that time of year. It was brilliant. If they do that event again, I can highly recommend doing it, but please remember to book early. At the back of the house, you can find the John Wesley Physic Garden, which is a delight to walk through on a beautiful day. A sign on the wall tells us that the plants growing here were used by John Wesley in his book of herbal remedies entitled Primitive Physics, or An Easy and Natural Way of Curing Most Diseases, written in 1747. At a time when many people could not afford professional health care, John Wesley was concerned to help. It indicates his concern for a person's whole health, physical and spiritual. And whilst on the subject of spirituality, it's at this point I think we should discuss the Epworth Rectory hauntings. For in December 1716, the well-ordered household of the Wesleys was disturbed by a poltergeist. The hauntings were especially well documented because John Wesley was away at school in London and asked his family for detailed accounts of the episode. It is these letters that give the best eyewitness material for the events. 2 servants were thought to be the first to hear Geoffrey's groanings and knockings in the dining room. The Wesley children then also began to report hearing noises, including that of footsteps, rattling chains, horns being blown, and wood being sawed. John's sister Emily gave it the nickname Old Geoffrey. Before long, everyone in the house except Samuel were experiencing the phenomena. Samuel was the last to believe that such supernatural events were occurring in his home. That is, until he began to have his own experiences. Being the type of man he was, Samuel decided to challenge old Geoffrey, and one night was said to shout, "Thou deaf and dumb devil, who dost thou frighten these children? Come to me, come to my study, I am a man." Apparently, old Geoffrey took Samuel up on the challenge, and that night while Samuel attempted to open his study door, the ghost slammed it shut. This was later followed by an experience where Samuel felt an invisible force pushing down on his chest as he lay in bed. With fear spreading amongst the household, it was decided that the family should buy a dog, and at first the dog would bark and leap, snapping from one side to the other when nothing was there. Unfortunately, though, the poltergeist eventually got the better of the dog, and after a few days it was said to creep away, spending most of its time underneath the table when old Geoffrey was nearby. The Wesley poltergeist is one of the best-known English poltergeist claims, and even Susanna spoke about it in her letters. All the family heard it together in the same room, at the same time, particularly at family prayers. It always seemed to all present in the same place at the same time, though often before any could say, "It is here," it would remove to another place. Strangely, after plaguing the house for the majority of December, it stopped in the January of 1717. So that's it, that's the end of the Wesley Trail. Thank you so much to everybody for watching. Please could you do me a massive favour and just give it a thumbs up. It'll take you like, 2 seconds to click, and that'll just help the channel to grow. If you're interested in this sort of content, then please do subscribe, because we're going to be going on lots of other adventures, lots of history tours, things like that. So yeah, come along if you want to. Thanks everyone, have a great day. Goodbye.